The main way that I would approach that problem is in the beginning to try to look at it holistically. And by that, to understand what are the end touch points for the user going to be, as you mentioned before, whether that's a mobile device, what kind of mobile experience, iOS versus Android, what kind of different devices that's going to live on, and then taking an approach to design that will encompass all of those. So if it's the fact that it's going to be a web-based application that will have mobile native applications as well, normally I would try to think about that from a mobile first perspective, which is whatever I'm designing for the desktop should work either in a way that it is responsive to smaller screen sizes and tablets and that can actually be stacked upon one another and work very well on mobile. So normally I'm looking at the mobile first. I actually quite enjoy the some of the limitations that come with that in terms of smaller real estate, excuse me. You have to be quite you have to decide what your priorities are, put them first, reduce clutter. It makes you be quite Spartan in some ways in some of your design decisions. But I believe taking that approach, that's what leads to products that feel ubiquitous across many different touch points and devices. My design training and sensibilities are tingling now, and what they're telling me is this is something that's become a bit gray with the current state of the time that we live in at the moment. Traditionally, I would give the answer that we should consider the device or the touch point first, and we should look at the design standards and digital standards, where we go back to home, how we can go back, where we have the normal priority CTA and the position of that. Traditionally, I would say yes, that should be aligned to the device rather than the holistic, ubiquitous approach. But I see recently the trends are starting to just merge all this thinking together into one. That it's more like the goalposts are becoming closer together. I feel that the delta between a desktop experience and a mobile experience isn't as far away as it used to be. And the kind of interactions that the users have become to expect, they're a lot more similar between those devices than they used to be. I still think we should take a device first approach just because that's what users are used to. And as the famous saying goes, don't make me think. We are creatures of habit. We are creatures who love patterns. We like to identify those patterns. They make us feel comfortable. We spend more time using the products if we feel comfortable. So I think we can find a happy middle ground between both of those. I think from the beginning, it's very important to understand the width and breadth of this company and really to first of all ask them what assets do you already have? What kind of guidelines do you already have in place? And as you mentioned, they can have hundreds, if not more, touch points. And when you look at larger companies like this, they're not only working in the digital realm, but they're on TV commercials, they're on billboards on the street, magazines, etc. So it's really the first point I try to do is to gather all of this material together and understand how does it fit or not fit together? What are the commonalities about that? Even sometimes you can look at their logo executions, and if you were to lay one on top of each other in different touch points, they wouldn't match for various different reasons. To do with pixels on a screen versus DPI and print contexts. But really what I try to do is understand the main use cases and try to avoid the fringe outliers for specific and very bespoke context. And from there, I would try to bring everything down to a level that would work primarily in a digital environment. So often that's removing elements, removing very detailed flourishes because they're not going to work on smaller devices. They won't work as small icons, for example, in many different social environments. And then I would really just begin to catalog everything they have in terms of the typography that they use, how it's used, the colors that they use across their brands, looking at are they using certain brands for advertising, but are they using them in a different way semantically for some of their applications? Sometimes there can be a real clash between the color that helps to sell something well or a particular car. It may mean danger in the case of an application, or especially if we look at the context of Volkswagen. They have in-car navigation systems and cockpit systems, and there's a whole different level of meaning to iconography and color theory there. So it's really trying to understand where these might overlap, where they might clash with another, and trying to have a plan that avoids that as much as possible. And then we're just really looking at taking the core brand colors, looking at how we can simplify it as much as possible. I'm a big fan of simplicity, and especially if you're building design systems and tokenizing them, it's much better to start simple and work out than to try to build Rome in a day and have everything to the X degree of detail and realizing that's not going to serve your purposes or it's going to become quite burdensome to maintain afterwards. So I would try to take the core values, the core stylings, try them out across a few different touch points, see if that's actually working first, see if there's something is missing, see if I could maybe even consolidate or further than that, and work my way out from there in concentric circles where I try a few examples, it seems to be working, I can add them to the system, I can add extra layers of complexity in as they're needed, and keep working out like that. And if it becomes too complex, take a step back. But I think the main advice would be start simple once you understand the landscape and work out from there. In terms of success, I would say we have to take that with a grain of salt and we have to, only time will tell, I would say, whether that's going to be actually success because the success will be measured in the success of the brand and the products that they put into market and how well those products do in the market. In terms of generating attention, I could say yes, it's definitely been successful. And I guess that's a sensitive topic because it's polarizing. Some people would say polarizing is great because that's generating engagement, it's generating conversation. People are very adamantly on one side of the other. This is against the history and the traditions of the brand. Whereas other people say, okay, they're doing something bold. Oh, they did this rebranding. They didn't even really talk about cars or show the product in some of the advertisements, which is against traditional thinking. But in general, I like the approach of the design lines that I've seen in the car. I think it's bold. I think that can also come down to whether you're a fan of Batman and the DC world because they've taken a lot of influence from that, in my opinion. But I think as long as it has people talking about it, as we're talking about it now, the creative directors there could give themselves a pat on the back and say, at least we got Trevor and Tom to talk about it.